Hello and welcome to a very special edition of Audiobook Reviews Quick Hit. Today I'm going to be talking about the Prydain Chronicles, starting with the Book of Three, the first book in that series. Now, I say this is special because The Land of Prydain and these books are actually the first fantasy I ever read. I have not read them since I was a very small child, so it's been 20 plus years since I've read these books. I recently got a collection online. It's a hardcover that includes all five books plus some extras. And I'm going through and remembering bits and pieces here, but giving it a review my first time coming back to it in a very long time. Might be a little bit of bias, but really, this series is the first fantasy I've read and what got me into fantasy. I remember loving the series as a kid. It's why I kept coming back to fantasy. It's why I eventually found The Wheel of Time, for example, becoming my favorite series and got way into fantasy to reading the books. The reason this channel even exists, so I can continue talking about books. I actually think I started with The High King when I was a kid, if I recall correctly, but I'm doing it in the right order this time, so starting with the Book of Three. And this series, it is a children's book series, but Lloyd Alexander really tries to make it an enjoyable series for anyone who's reading it, I think. The book starts as many a fantasy story starts. It's a young boy on a farm about to go on an adventure. But there, a lot of the tropes are intentionally changed, twisted, made differently. It starts out pretty normal. You have Taryn. I'm also probably going to mispronounce many names because the series is based on Welsh mythology, so there's some fun ones. But you have Taryn, the main character, and he's on a farm and he's dreaming of going on adventures and doesn't really want to learn all the different things. And he has the wizard Dalben and an older man Call who lives there as well. And he is wanting just more to life, so he's promoted to assistant pig keeper in charge of keeping track of Henwen, the pig who is also an oracle and can predict the future. Fun to start with. So we do end up getting exposition dumped to us a bit at the beginning. It is a shorter story. It needs to kick off and get going. So we're told a lot of different things right off the bat. We learn from Dalvin from the Book of Three. We're talked about and kind of pushes things forward. We learn about the land of Prydain a little bit, about its kings, and we learn about the Horned King, who is the villain coming in. Then, presumably, the Horned King coming scares off the livestock. The chickens are flying away. Everything's going, and Henwen ends up trying to escape. So Taryn, of course, being the newly promoted assistant pig keeper, goes off to chase Henwen. This is kind of where things actually begin. So runs off and ends up running into some of these soldiers and part of the army of the Horned King, and is saved by this just scraggy, shaggy, vagabond looking type guy who he finds out is actually Gwydion, who is one of the greatest heroes of the land. Right off the bat, a don't judge a book by its cover type lesson. Gwydion tells him some more, gives him some more exposition, talks about the Horned King, talks about the Cauldron born, kind of zombie like creatures, tells him that Call, who he just thought was this boring old man, actually was a great hero in his day as well. And they decide they're going to go and try to find Henwen. And of course, things don't turn out that way. They end up getting attacked by the Cauldronborn. They both get captured and they're brought to this castle. We're introduced to another villain, and this is where things start to depart as well. So Taryn and Gwydion are split up, and Taryn ends up meeting Eilonwy, still really probably mispronouncing that, but she lives in the castle, had been sent there to apprentice with the enchantress, the evil enchantress who's there, and she can get around through tunnels under the castle and ends up rescuing Taryn, and he convinces her to rescue his friend in the other cell. Well, it doesn't end up being Gwydion. We find out later he was taken away somewhere else, but it ends up being this so-called bard whose name is, oh boy, now I have to say it, Fluter Flam, I think. Too many consonants, darn Welsh. But Fluter Flam, who we find out was the king of a very small area, decided he wanted to be a bard and is in possession of a harp that plays itself, but every time he lies or exaggerates, the strings break. Comedic fun there too. Along the way, he did meet, I forgot to mention, Gurgi, who is kind of like a half dog, half man creature who speaks in rhymes, and I'm pretty sure is really mostly exists for the fact that you're supposed to read the story out loud to a child and say, do a funny voice. This would be one I'm sure there are audiobooks of that would be interesting to hear how everything's done with it as well. But they travel and they go through everything. They're being chased through the woods. They end up meeting some other groups of people. But the big thing is this adventure, Taran kind of is in charge. Even though he's young, he's trying to finish what Gwydion started. He thinks Gwydion is dead. They get into fights. There is some violence. It's Lloyd Alexander isn't trying to sugarcoat everything and make it really safe. It's trying to be a bit realistic. And at the end of the story, this is where I guess if you're concerned about spoiler, this part is the spoiler piece. But at the end of the story, it's not Taran who ends up saving the day. He's trying to. He thinks that's what he's supposed to do. It's an adventure. He wants to be heroic. He tries to pull this magic sword, and it doesn't end up going well. And instead, Gwydion ends up being there. There's some reason how he got there and everything that happened, but he ends up saving the day. And so Taran's not feeling particularly heroic. He's thinking, well, I wasn't fighting in the last stand. I didn't actually take the magic sword to begin with. I didn't do any of these things. But it kind of gives the lesson that, well, it's not always saving the day, it's not always being the hero, but that being brave, being kind, and his courage and his kindness both play big parts in the story can actually be more important. And I think it's a nice not only kind of parable lesson in there, considering this is a kid's book, trying to teach kids that those are important qualities and being the hero is not always the most important thing, but it also does away with some of the tropes, even though this is a kid's book and most would probably go more heavy into the trope basis, does a good job of changing it around, having a good story, not shying away from real things that would be happening in the story, and also being complete as well. So really, I did enjoy the story. It does give you a bit of an exposition dump at the beginning and a little bit at the end. The middle of the story, though, where it actually kind of breathes, very enjoyable as well. I do look forward to reading the next in here. I'll be doing these in shorter videos because they're pretty short stories. So they'll normally be even slightly shorter than this video. This one's a little bit longer because I wanted to do the intro on why I'm doing these to begin with. If you enjoyed this, want to see the rest or the other reviews that I have and will be posting, please feel free to like and subscribe, and will let me know if you have any thoughts in the comments below.